If you have a heart attack in the United States, the real shock might come when you see the bill. We're talking tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars for surgery, hospital stays, and life-saving drugs. Bypass surgery? That's a six-figure price tag. Even basic prescriptions to keep your heart ticking can cost more than rent. We hear it all the time: eat healthy, exercise, don't smoke, and sure, those things matter. But what if I told you, despite everything we've been taught, heart disease isn't just about personal choice? What if one of the key drivers of the coronary heart disease epidemic has been hiding in plain sight? This is about one of the biggest public health disasters of the 20th century, and a breakthrough, a striking decline in fatal heart attacks that began more than 50 years ago and has remained unsolved until now. But wait, aren't heart attacks inevitable? Aren't they part of growing old? Let's rewind. Until the 1900s, heart attacks were rare, but by the 1930s, heart attacks were the leading cause of death in the United States, and not because people were living longer. Deaths from heart attacks continued to increase, and by the 1960s, they accounted for nearly 1/3 of all deaths. But then, in 1968, a seismic shift occurred. Deaths from heart attacks, which had been climbing for years, dropped by 20%. In the fall of 1978, leading doctors and scientists from across the United States gathered at the National Institute of Health to determine if the decline was real and what caused it. They concluded that the drop in heart attacks was too steep, too widespread, and too sustained to be a fluke. The decline was real, they said, and it affected everybody. 190,000 more people were alive than expected. But here's where it gets complicated. While experts knew about some risk factors for heart attacks, they couldn't explain why the numbers were dropping so fast. The truth was, they had too many possible explanations, and none of them seemed to fit all the data. But here's the kicker. The drop in heart attacks affected everybody, and it was happening everywhere. Something bigger was going on. It must be something in the environment. Was it fewer people smoking, better medical care, diet, exercise? This is where things get really interesting. Thanks to growing public health awareness and lawsuits, the United States began phasing out leaded gasoline. The Clean Air Act, passed in 1970, was a game changer. Over the next 2 decades, the production of leaded gasoline plummeted, and with it, lead in air. As the use of leaded gasoline dropped, so did the amount of lead found in the blood of Americans. This toxic metal, which had been silently poisoning millions, was suddenly disappearing from the air we breathed, and with it, deaths from heart attacks. It doesn't get much clearer than this. But if you need more proof, we can look to Britain. While the United States saw a drop in heart attacks in the 1970s, Britain didn't, even though air pollution had declined. When Britain did begin to reduce production of leaded gasoline in the mid-1980s, however, heart attacks declined just as they had in the United States. But wait, it wasn't only heart attacks that declined. Hypertension, or high blood pressure, plummeted in the United States from 35% to 20%. That's a huge drop. That alone would have reduced the number of Americans on blood pressure meds by half. Scientists couldn't explain the decline with the usual factors: smoking, medication, obesity. But hypertension among Americans dropped in lockstep with blood lead levels. In 1985, Dr. Jim Perkel predicted that the phase-out of leaded gasoline would cause a substantial reduction in hypertension and heart attacks. Still, the idea that lead poisoning was behind the decline never gained the attention it deserved. For decades, regulatory agencies operated under the assumption that small amounts of lead were safe. This assumption wasn't an accident. In 1921, a chemist at General Motors discovered that adding lead to gasoline improved fuel efficiency. Leaded gasoline production took off. Then, in 1924, 80% of workers manufacturing tetraethyl lead at Standard Oil in New Jersey had severe lead poisoning. 5 died. Sales of leaded gasoline were promptly banned in New Jersey, Philadelphia, and New York City. The U.S. Surgeon General convened an expert panel to determine whether it was safe to add tetraethyl lead to gasoline. The nation's leading chemical warfare expert warned, "The use of tetraethyl lead will cause vast numbers of the population to suffer from slow lead poisoning with hardening of the arteries. But his warnings were dismissed. Instead, Robert Kehoe, the chief medical officer of the Ethyl Corporation, successfully argued that until tetraethyl lead from automobile emissions was proven to be toxic, government agencies should not prohibit it. You guessed it. They put the rights of industry over the health of Americans. What's more, the Kehoe rule set a century-long precedent, allowing industry to use poisonous chemicals until scientists repeatedly proved they were toxic. Heart attacks have declined by an astonishing 70% since 1968, but they are still the leading cause of death in the United States. And yet, the devastation caused by lead poisoning is rarely talked about. Despite compelling evidence, it's still easier to blame people for their lifestyle choices than it is to regulate industry. Lead poisoning isn't only an American problem. We're in the midst of a worldwide epidemic. As affluent countries banned lead in gas and other consumer products, the lead industry shifted its markets to industrializing countries like India and China. Over the past 3 decades, heart attacks climbed upwards in industrializing countries. In 2023, the World Bank estimated that lead killed 5.5 million people around the world every year at a cost of $4.6 trillion. It turns out the biggest public health breakthroughs aren't about miracle drugs or cutting-edge technology. They're about stopping the problem at the source. Lead was never necessary, never safe. But thanks to the Kehoe rule, industry's got a free pass to poison billions, and we keep making the same mistake. Instead of cleaning up the damage, we should prevent it. That means giving federal agencies real power to keep toxic chemicals out of the air, the water, and our homes. Because history proves one thing: if we don't stop them, no one will.